One. Share, and then I'll go to my presentation. And I hope everybody is able to see my screen. So welcome everybody. I don't know if it's morning or afternoon or evening for you, but in any case, I'm very happy you were able to join. If you have any questions during my presentation, you can put them in the chat, and Jorrit can also ask them, for example, during my talk or after. There's also a bit of time to ask some questions. What I'm going to do today is give you a short introduction of RShiny. So I'll demonstrate an RShiny app that I built myself and I use myself. I'll talk about how the Shiny code works and a bit about debugging. I want to show you some options you have with Shiny. And then I want to break out in like different Zoom rooms, depending on how many people we are, and to give you some hands-on moments with the code. And for that, I made a couple of exercises, and we'll just see how far we'll get with that. And then at the end, I'll also walk you through the answers to the exercises. Maybe there's some extra questions. Yeah, and that's the plan. So I'll start with giving a short demo of a Shiny PC model. That's an app that I built and I use myself. So I'll quit my presentation for a bit and I'll show you this app. So this is an app that I made because I work with a model and I had to debug it, and I had to look at a lot of different outputs. So I thought, well, I would like to sort of be able to scroll through my data rather than constantly adjust things in a script. So I decided to make a Shiny app for that, where I have like a button that says something if my output is coming from Excel or from R. So in some cases it's coming from R, and then I have different model types. So in this case, I want to show you a bit of the network output. Then I have a button and I can upload some output from my model. It takes me a short moment, depending on how large these files are. That can take a bit longer. I have built-in a short table to double check if my data was read in the right way. And then here I have this box with show data, and I can choose which one of the two files that I just uploaded I want to look at. This choose node connects to like different parts of the model output. So maybe I want to look at 2, and then here I can type in some other part of my output data. So maybe I want to look at chlorophyll A that's coming out of my model. I want to look at it for the whole time period. And when I click another button, I get this graph that gives me some insight into my data. Maybe I want to look at some other part of the data. So maybe I want to know something about the vegetation in my model, and then I can simply add that. So this app allowed me actually to debug my model a bit faster, because it was kind of easy for me to quickly check output. And when I have an interesting figure, I can also export it to PDF or PNG or get the raw data underneath. So this is just to give you an idea of how I use it, and maybe give you some ideas of how you could use it. So that brings me back to my presentation, because that's all. Oh, and if you want to take a look at the code, this code is also on GitHub. So you're welcome to look at that. So that brings me to the actual introduction to Shiny code, because it's all fine to look at somebody else's app, but how can you build it for yourself? And I want to give credits to the shinyrstudio.com website, because when I first made this workshop, I went over there to get a lot of inspiration, and I think they also do a good job in explaining how the Shiny code works. So to start with, Shiny applications can have different types of file structure. So you can build a simple app that you put in one script only, and then it's called app.r. Or you can have like a more complex app, and then you can split different sections of your code into different scripts. And then you get, for example, a UI.r and a server.r. And in this presentation, I'll just mainly focus on these simple apps with one script, because that's more than enough for you to start with. And if you're ever confronted with such a script, you can run these scripts in RStudio via the run button. which is located near the top right. I think usually, well, depends a bit on what your RStudio looks like. And then inside this app.r, there are 3 very important elements. Usually there's the UI part, there's a server part, and there's a Shiny app part. And after this, I'll dive a bit further into what the UI and the server stands for. And then this Shiny apps function combines the 2 of them to actually build and run the app. So there's a UI and a server part, and what does that mean? So the UI stands for server user interface, and this is the section of code where you really decide on what you want your app to look like. So where should your plots be? Where should your buttons be? That is all part of the user interface. And then the server part of the code really tells your app what to do. So what kind of calculations do you want to make? So the server side is really the calculator in the brains of the code, while the user interface is the layout of your code. And then if we start to dig a little deeper, we start looking at the actual code, then the user interface part usually looks like this in its simplest form. There's this statement of fluid page, and that relates to the fact that when you have an app and it changes in size, you want to shift the plot sizes, for example, accordingly. So this fluid page takes care of the fact that your plot can be, or your app can be scaled. And then there's the inside sort of the user interface. And in this case, you have a title panel, a sidebar layout, and then in that sidebar layout, there's a sidebar panel and a main panel. So what does that look like if you would run this and you would take a look at that? So this title panel is located here on top. So cool app title, for example, in this case. And then the sidebar layout splits this lower part, sort of the body of your app, into a sidebar to the left and a main panel on the right. And in this case, there's just awesome sidebar and genius main panel. But usually in the sidebar, you would have buttons or sliders, and in the main panel, you would have your plots. So the left part is for collecting input, and the right part is usually to show output, although other options are possible too. And in the user interface, you can then add text, images, widgets, and our output, and I'll walk you through each of these elements. So in our Shiny, you can add text, and Shiny uses similar coding as HTML. So if you're a bit familiar with that, that helps. But otherwise, it's also not super difficult. You have like P for paragraph and strong if you want your text to be bold. And you can adjust the alignment of your text, the color of your text, and the size of your text. And this is an example. So here again, we're in this user interface, and we have this fluid page, title panel, etc. And then here in the main panel, I've added all these different age elements, and these relate to the size of the text. And you can also see that the bottom one, I changed the text to red, so I adjusted the style. And I made it italic, which I did with this EM function. And I aligned them all to center. So just to give you an idea of what's possible. Another thing you can do is the images. So if you want to add an image to your app, then you need to add another folder to your directory where your script is located. This folder should have the name www. And you just need to put an image, like a PNG image, inside this folder. And then you need to add a bit of code to your script as well. So here we are again in the main panel, which is this part on the right side. And I added this image function, and I have referred to the file that's inside the www folder. In this case, it's like a sloth from the website Pixabay that I entered here. Another cool part, and one of the more essential parts of the app, is a widget. And a widget is a web element somebody can interact with. And there are many types available. This is just a selection, but you can have a button or a slider or a checkbox, radio buttons, you name it, and it's probably available. And with these widgets, you need to add something, in this case, to the sidebar panel. You can, of course, also do the main panel, but now I picked the sidebar panel. And you add a function like slider input that has an input idea, so the name of this input slider. You can give it a label which relates to what's here in bold. You give it a minimum value, maximum value, and some default value to start with. And then you need to add, of course, some R output. So we want to look at graphs, for example. And anything you can plot in R in your plot window can usually be made visible in Shiny as well. So you can add tables or you can add plots, but you can also add maps, whatever you like. And then you get something like plot output in your main panel to tell the app that it's a plot you want. It could also be table output, for example, or text output, if you want to have a different type of output in your app. So that's all cool. So we now have an idea of what type of elements we can work with, but how do you actually add the reactivity to your app, right? Because this is just buttons and nothing is connected yet. So we now talked about the user interface, left part, and we're going to focus a bit on the right part, the server side, which ensures that if you move this button to the right, you get more bins, for example, in your histogram. So, and like we just saw on the user interface side, you have this slider input, for example, and you have this plot output, which relates to this slider and this plot. And I would like to point out to you that the names of these elements are very important. So the input ID will come back in the server side, and the output ID will come back as well. So in this case, it's bins and it's dist plot. So let's take a look at the server side. So here we have, again, like a function, and it's going into the server part. And here we have this output $dist plot thing. So this output refers to a list of elements that your app is aware of. And dist plot tells something about the name of your element that you're referring to. And this name is exactly the same name as the name you had in your user interface. And inside this render plot function, we have, and here we have a render plot function, which relates directly to this plot output function. So we can also render tables, and then we would have a table output, or we could render text, and then we would have text output. So in this way, these different elements are connected to each other. And then it's good to take a look at what's happening inside of this render plot function. So I hope you are a bit familiar with basic R code, because here you can see that we're working with a histogram that's based on data X, and that has breaks defined by a bins local argument object. And this bins local object is defined above with a sequence defined by a certain minimum and a maximum, but the length, so the amount of breaks within this sequence is defined by this input $bins. And I thought that so input $bins. And it's this input list with this element again that is related directly to your slider input. So in this way, you connect your user input to your function again. And that's basically the basics of this reactivity. It's combining these slider inputs or other kind of widget inputs with some element within your render function, which you then put into your output list that is going to create this reactivity. I hope that's a bit clear now. So then if you slide your button, you will definitely see some change in your plots. So to recap that again, because this is like the essentials of working with our Shiny, you have your user interface, and in the user interface side, you need to add some form of a plot output to display reactive objects in your app. And that can also be a plot table or a plot text. And you need to add a widget there to get user input. And on the server side, you need to use this render plot something. And it's also important to note here that we have this special like bracket, curly bracket situation that indicates that we're working with a reactivity element. And you need this type of thing to create reactive objects in your app. And it can not just be render plot, but it can be a render table or render text, etc. And you need to save that render plot to an output list, just like output $, put plot name here, and then you're good to go. And you need to put that widget input also in the form of input $, put widget name here, inside that render plot function to get the reactivity started. So when does the reactivity happen? So that happens whenever you change your widget input. So if you use your slider, our Shiny will automatically know that it needs to update. Whenever you start your app, it will evaluate all the functions, and whenever your window size changes. So there's automatic detection for that. And then another important element is debugging, because our Shiny is a little bit different because it has this reactivity. So normal debugging does not really work on an app, except for maybe these breakpoints. So what you can do in RStudio is add a breakpoint on the line before a part of the function. And you do that by clicking next to that numbered line, but you can only use this type of breakpoints inside the server section of your code. So that's not always what you want to have. What works a little bit better is to add browser in your code whenever you have a bug, and you put it right there where you think the issue is. And this statement, as soon as your app evaluates that statement, so when it hits that part of the code, it will stop your app, bring you back into RStudio, and then you can see what kind of objects are available to you at that point in time. So this might sound a bit mysterious, but as soon as you would start doing this, I think it will speak for itself. And then there's a final option. You can also visualize the reactivity. And for that, you need another package, the React log package. And I've added how you can do this also in the exercise app that we're going to look at later. Although I just realized that I have not made a specific exercise about that, but it's just good to know that it's there. And there's also this web page that is really clear on how to debug as well. So if you don't understand this right now, that's also a good place to look for more information. So now we know a bit about reactivity and how that happens and how things are connected. So I just want to show you a couple of Shiny options so you get a feeling of what else can I do with Shiny. So you can upload code or upload, sorry, not code, but input with our Shiny. And I'm not going to go through all of the code at the right side right now, but I'll give you my presentation at a later point so you can check back. I just want to share that you can do this right now. So this, you can upload something. You can also download something. So you can add a button in your app so people can extract data from your app. You can make dynamic user interfaces. So when you click on a button, you can get more buttons or hide something temporarily. You can combine other packages with Shiny, for example, Shiny Dashboard, and that makes your app look a little bit nicer, a little bit smoother. So this is also the package that I used in the exercise app that we'll work with later on. You can combine ggplot with Shiny. There's also Plotly, which is a package that makes plots interactive. So that's a nice option. And you can also combine apps with in your app. So that's also a nice one. And sometimes, although it's not really recommended to make your app super slow, if your app is becoming a little bit slow, there are Shiny CSS loaders, so turning wheels, for example, to give people some kind of indication that something is still running, although it's taking a bit of time. When I have to believe what they say online, this is not per se, like as soon as your app starts to take this amount of time, or it's taking a very long time, that's usually not such a nice thing for your user. And there are definitely more options out there, and you can check out our Shiny Studio gallery for inspiration as well. So I'm wondering if anyone has any questions at this point.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to make this available online, or do people always need to have the script and then run it?
There is actually a way to make it available online. It's good that you ask. There is the Shiny server, and it allows you to put your app online for free, as long as not too many people want to use it. So there is actually a way for you to put your app online and then, yeah, make it available to everyone. I can maybe put a link later on in an email or something if you're curious about that. I don't see any other questions at this point. So then I think it might be a nice point in time to give you some actual feeling for how this works and to get you going. And now I'm thinking, I put the exercises in my, oh, I see something in the chat as well. Oh yeah, I see that some universities also host our Shiny servers. So if your server, if your university does that, then of course, do your thing, make use of that. And I'm sort of looking, maybe I stop sharing for a moment. I don't know, new share, stop share for a moment, because I'm wondering with how many people we are. There's 34 of us. So I thought it would be a nice idea to split you up in different breakout rooms, so you can ask each other also questions while working on the exercises. But I think that then you probably won't be able to see the exercises. So Jollet, what would be the best way to provide people with that sheet?
You could also put the link to your presentation in the chat, maybe, then people could see presentation while they're in the breakout room.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do that right now. So this is the link to my presentation. I hope everybody can reach it. Just let me know if you can't, and then I can also send it via email. And then I'm gonna see if I can split you up in like groups of 5 or something, and I'll give you 45 minutes to work with these exercises. Just see how far you get. And the last 15 minutes of this workshop, we'll all get together in this main room, and then I'll walk us through most of the exercises as well. So I think if I create 6 groups, that will be fine. Let's create some breakout rooms. And if anyone has any questions, I think I'll also hop around. So I'll see you then as well. Yeah. Okay. I think I just opened all rooms. Good luck all. And I think there are probably, so to repeat for the recording, there are some issues with people working on a Mac. Danielle, I think she just discovered that it probably has to do with the SF package that's probably not compatible with a Mac. So out commenting that part at least solved part of the problem for her. So just to give you an idea that you're not alone when it did not fully work on a Mac. And there were also some people with some problems with installing the different libraries. And I guess this is an issue with the exercise app that I created, because I wanted to show you like lots of different functionalities and sort of see how, yeah, show you how you can build around those parts of the code. But that also makes the app more susceptible to, I don't know, these type of issues. So that's a good thing to yeah, to let you all know, and for me to know for the next time I'm giving a workshop. Jorrit, you told me that your group also had some issues still, but I thought I'll just show everyone now. I'll just walk you through the answers anyway. And would that also solve your question or not?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought I'd just do that also for the people who did not manage to get it to run, to just have an idea of, okay, what should I've done to get it all, or yeah, what should I've seen, and also for people watching this later to have an idea on what the solutions would be to the exercises. So I'll start sharing my screen again. Yeah. Yeah. So the first exercise. Sharing. Sorry, what was about setting up your own app. So if I start from a clean RStudio setup, I'm looking at a bit of a weird screen now, but then you can go to File, New File, and open up a Shiny web app. And in that case, you have to type a new name for your app. You create a single file, and you need to make some directory to work in. So for example, I created a new folder for me to start my project in, and then I open that. And if I then push the create button, that will give me this basic script with that's calling the library, the Shiny library, and that already has some user interface part and some server part defined, and the Shiny app. And if you then push run app, it will actually give you a working app with that histogram and that slider. So in the exercise, I ask you to adjust the maximum amount of bins. So that's in the slider input widget in the server, in the user interface part of the code. And here you can simply, I don't know, say that you want a maximum of 70 bins. And I also ask you to adjust the default value that the slider is on. So instead of 30, you can put it to 40, for example. And then when I reload the app, you can see that the slider now runs from 1 up to 70, and that the default value of your slider input button is now set at 40. And that all still works. Another thing I said, like, you can change the ID of the slider input. So maybe I don't want this to be known as bins, but as, I don't know, buckets or something. But if I would run this, my app would crash, because then it does not understand where the output is anymore. Because if I go to the user interface, to the server side, right here, and I look at this input widget, I should also change this to buckets. And now this input is again connected to the name of the slider input right here. And if I run that app, then you'll see that you get some output again. And then I asked you to check out some examples. And here some people discovered that if they have other packages loaded and they simply type run example, you might get another view. So in that case, you can also type Shiny, and then those, I don't know the name of them right now, but those little guys, and run example. And that will tell R in specific that you want to look at the run examples from the Shiny package. And then you see this list of valid examples. So maybe I want to look at example number 2. So I'll type in again, Shiny run example, and add that part. If I run that, I see that there's this example app opening up, and I can take a look at that. I can see how things change. And then underneath, that's the cool thing, you actually also can see the code of that app. So this is also a great idea to get some new inspiration. So that's that part. Then in exercise 3, the idea was to look at the example app. And now I have to start up that one. Just give me a moment. just made some quick adjustments for Danielle to see if she could run it. That means I now have to open it again. So let me get this thing here. So this is the practice app. I hope it still runs. Yeah. Okay, great. And I asked everybody to take a look at the structure of this app. So actually you all just had one script right here, but I just added a couple. And there were 5 folders in here as well. So there was this data folder with a lakes CSV in there. There was a documentation folder that had a PDF file with a mysterious name. And that actually referred to some sort of Ferrari manual. There was a functions folder that had a very simple R test function script in it. If you opened that, you would have seen this function here. Yeah, let's close that. There was a user test data folder with some test data in it. And there was this www folder. And if you opened that, there was a frog and a mouse PNG file. And those are, of course, all somehow related to this app. So if we start looking at this app structure, then, well, at the top, of course, we have all these packages that are loaded. Then there are some settings, and we see that there's a function loaded here. That's the test function that we saw in one of the folders. There's a lakes.csv that's being loaded right here. I'll take a sip. And here is the start of the user interface. So we see a header and a sidebar and a body, which is slightly different than you were used to seeing before. And that is because here we're using the Shiny dashboard package. So that makes this look slightly different. And then if I scroll down, I see something about tab items and boxes. And the end of the user interface, where all the elements like the headbar, the sidebar, header, sidebar, and body are being put into the user interface again. And here's the start of the server side. So here we see a lot of elements being put into the output list. Here, for example, we see something about displaying a table, something about displaying a plot, something about an interactive plot with the render plotly function here. So there's loads of going on. We can see that. And if we load that, we see that there's this main home tab here. There's other tabs. There's a test tab and there's a help tab. This help tab has one button that says download document, and then you'll get to the Ferrari manual again. And on the test tab, there's actually a lot of interesting things going on because here are multiple boxes. And you can open and close them by clicking on the plus sign on the right side. And oh, I see that I actually have done some already in this one. Here you could upload something. So you can choose a file, and the file that you wanted to choose was in the user test data folder. And then you could see in the display that the data that you just uploaded got visible. And here you also had other tabs. So you had a download button again and some extra data, which related to the lakes.csv that you saw in your first file as well. And you could display things. So once you uploaded the test data, you had a GG plot that you could show, a plotly option as well. You got some data on a map. And I see that this is actually the file that contains the answers. So that's a bit silly of me. In any case, once you had a bit of a gist of how it all looked like, I asked you to move the radio buttons upward. So they were first, so that means that you need to orient yourself more into which parts of the app are located where. And we've seen that you have these tab names here on the left side, so home, test, and help. So those are anchor points already. So I see that there's this test tab, for example. And then there's also the box names that have titles. So here I see this title of test page. So what you guys were looking for was the radio buttons were first down here in the select something tab. And you wanted to move them upward. So actually, I'll just do that again. I'll remove them here because you guys have them right here. Yeah, so here you would see like click on a radio button and then the radio buttons right underneath that with multiple choices. And I wanted you to move this section one box up. So and therefore you just had to copy and paste this section and move it upward. Like it doesn't matter to which location exactly. You just have to make sure that you add a comma after the whole thing, to make sure that all the arguments inside this box function have a comma behind them, except for the last one that closes it. So actually, I hope I didn't break it at the moment. And here you can see that like I'm again moved the radio buttons up. And even though they're now up there, when I click on those buttons, I still see something changing down here because we did not change the location of the output. Then I'm going to drag all of this out of the screen because I think the next exercise was to add the histograms to the script. And since I have them in my script already, I want to kick them out quickly. Where did I put the sliders? Yeah. Let me see. If I remove the wrong part, that will be interesting. Okay, let's see if I did it right. So I'll reload the app just to make sure that the histograms are no longer in here. And I wanted you to add them to the display something box in a new tab right next to the map. So the first thing I want to do is adjust something on the user interface side, right? Because I need a space for my new histogram to appear in. So for that, I'm scrolling back to the user interface and I'm looking for the part where we have all these tabs with GG, plot, plotly, and map, and that's inside this box that says display something. So here I'm at the box that says upload something, so that's not the right one. I want to be at the display something box. And here I see this tab panel that says ggplot and a tab panel that says plotly and a tab panel that says map. So I want to add a tab panel that says histogram. And I'm just copy and pasting. And I can remove this. So that leaves me with an extra tab, and we can check to see if that is exactly what we wanted. Oh, sorry, it needs to be in display something. Now we see that I've created this extra tab here, but there's nothing in it yet because I still need to add the slider and the plot output. So if I want to do that, I can go back to my code from the first exercise. And I hope, do I still have that open? Yeah. So this is the code from the first exercise that you actually created yourself by just clicking on that file, new file. And here in the user interface side, I can see that there's this slider input section that I want to copy. So I'll just copy that. And I'll paste that into my script right after the title, for example. And that's not the only thing I want. Besides the slider input, I also want that histogram to turn up in that tab. So I need to add a bit of histogram code. And for that, I need to have this plot output in that tab as well. So I just copy that plot output part and I put it right here in that tab panel as well. And then we can see if we can actually look at that. Do we have anything to look at? Well, yeah, we can see now that this slider is added and the plot output is not shown yet because we have not connected any data to it. So that's the last part we need to do in this exercise, is to actually add the server side. And for that, and we need to add something here in the server part. So then we go back again to that code of our first exercise, and I copy this whole section with the output $displot. And I'll put that into my server code. And if I want to be neat, I put it in a logic spot. So preferably right after the code for the map. But in reality, it does not really matter where you put this, this item. It's just usually it's practical to have some kind of information in your code so you know where to find it. Otherwise, you can get lost. And if I run all that again, we can go back to the test tab in the display. We see here this histogram, and now we have both the slider and the output. And if we move it, there's actually something happening. So I think those were all the exercises. I might have gone a bit fast for you, but I hope that if you maybe check back also on the recording, that you can follow, that you understand what's happening here. And I don't know, does anyone have any questions? I'll stop sharing. Trying to make a new share. Where is it? Yeah, stop sharing. Any questions?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm just wondering, because okay, this is my first time to interact with these R Shiny, like Shiny apps and creating the apps through this R. And I'm wondering, where can we apply this? Like, where, like, any ideas of where it's possibly applicable? I know they must be there, but just help me out.
Yeah, I have worked on a couple of apps before that were actually applied as well. So usually when you have, for example, a lot of data that you want to visualize, if you want to explore your data, for example, or if you want to make others, give others the opportunity to explore your data, then it's kind of nice that they can scroll through data. And it's also nice to use this if you don't want to confront people with a lot of code. So not everyone you work with might be very used to working with R. And if the only thing they have to do is like maybe push a button or maybe go to a server and then click on a few buttons, that makes the barrier much lower to actually work together on code. So these are different ways where you can use it. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I see something in the chat. Rosalie is asking, is there a function that returns all the objects ID and what they are created for an input? So for example, if you run names, I don't know actually. So for example, if you ran the names, something like a names thing for your list, I'm not sure because I actually have never tried that. I can imagine if your app is becoming larger and you have like lots of elements that would come in handy. But I have to admit that I've never tried to look for it, so I don't have the answer to that question right now. Yeah.
Could you? Thank you very much for your answer. I prefer to spell it out because it wasn't clear. Could you show us one of the debug if you have time? You know, it was a bit of code that you were putting somewhere in your script and that would stop it. I'm interested in seeing how it works. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I just also I saw that we're a little bit over time because I said that the workshop would last an hour and a half. So for anyone who feels like I'm good, feel free to leave also, and then I'll give Rosalie her example as well. For that, I'll start sharing my screen again. Yeah, share. So I think to debug something, it would be nice to, I don't know, get a bug somewhere. Maybe I make this a Y and then check out if that's giving me. Okay, yeah. So now, for example, I'm here in my histogram section and I see that there's an error. An object X is not found.
We do see an R script, but not one where you are at the histogram section.
Did I not? Am I sharing? Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sharing on the wrong screen. Sorry, I'll switch screens. That's the issue if you have two. So share. Yeah, so I went back to the example script and to the histogram section where I added something, and there used to be an X right here, and I just changed it to a Y to create some kind of bug in my code. And then I reloaded the app and I went to this display something histogram section, and here it says, oh, there's an error, object X is not found. So right now, I have multiple options. Like I could use that dot in front of the line. However, that only works in the in a part of the code. Or I could use this browser, and I prefer using the browser option, but it still requires you a bit of thinking, because I can put that browser statement somewhere in my code, but preferably I want to show part of the code where the problem is actually happening. So right now I know, of course, that my problem is happening inside this tab somewhere, and it's very likely that it's happening in the reactive side of things, right? My plot is not showing up. So maybe it's a good idea to start looking in that section. So you can start by trying to add that browser statement somewhere right here, right at the beginning of where you enter into this part of the code. So I just add this browser statement into that section, and then I reload my app. And now when I go to this section of the code, as soon as I click on that histogram button, it brings me back into the into RStudio, and it brings me back in a point of my code where I can start asking, start working inside the code. So I actually can run this section now with the data that's available to my app at this point in time. Do you understand what I mean, Rosalie, or not?
Yes, I do, but I was wondering if you don't know that the error is there. So for example, if you have, I tried earlier when I was trying to create my own app to create a new plot, but I didn't put it in quotes in the UI, and so it wasn't finding it. And so I didn't really know where was my mistake until I compared an existing. So is there a way like that to, if the message is not explicit?
Well, I'm thinking, so you don't know where your problem is. That's kind of what you mean. You usually do have some kind of gist, I guess, in which section it would be, because you're trying to add a plot maybe, or trying to do something about it. So then I would put this browser statement more at the beginning of where your code still works. And then I would run through that little section of code and see if all the elements there are still what I expect them to be. And I would work my way down from that. So that will take a while, I guess. And another option would be, of course, wait, if I start my app again, would be that reactive log. Although I must admit that I do not use that very frequently. But you can call up this, I think it's Control F3, call up this other window. Why don't I see it right now? There's like this React log that you can use. Oh, but I'm still in debugging mode. So whenever you're debugging and you've entered the app in this sort of temporary moment where the data of that moment is available. You're in debug mode and you need to stop that consciously if you want to go back to your real app. So I stopped that. Now I'm running the app again. And I think now if I press Control F3, of course it's not working. You need to. Okay, I was expecting my, let me check if I'm doing something wrong. There should, another window should pop up. Yeah, and somehow I'm not seeing it. Probably as soon as we end the meeting, it will work. But what you should be able to do, maybe if I open it in a browser, options. Oh yeah, okay. So you can also click on that button and just click and open the app in an actual browser. And now apparently it does work. So if you then push the Control F3, you can open up this window, and here you can scroll through your app. And this is another way to understand how all the elements inside your app are connected to each other. But I would say, like, if you want to know more about how this exactly works, that you check out the debug page also on our Shiny, the website. But that would be another way for you to step through your app and to see where bugs could be happening. Yeah, but it is a bit finicky, at least I think, to debug your Shiny apps, definitely. Does anybody else have another question? If not, then I hope it was oh, maybe Kaylin?
I was just going to say, thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad if it could be of some help. Yes. I'm very happy you all showed up. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And I'll make sure that I'll send also the slides and the recordings to the whole group again. Yeah. Goodbye.
Hey, thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you very much. Yep. The links of the recordings will be shared on Slack. So if you haven't joined Slack yet, please join Slack in order to access to the recordings.